What's up, everybody? This is Fred Ricciani of the Sports Quarry. I'm joined by our good friend Paul Lazenby, well-respected combat sports journalist, stuntman, former pro wrestler, mixed martial artist. But we're here to talk about the launch of TSC Games. That's right, as I mentioned on the Raw Recap, we are covering video games from now on, in addition to pro wrestling, in addition to mixed martial arts, and everything else in between. And we're here to talk to Paul, motion capture artist and stunt coordinator for video games. Paul, you've had every job under the sun in the entertainment industry. Tell us how you got involved in games.
It was actually through a buddy of mine named Ken Sia, who in 2002 I met Ken, and he worked then and still works at Electronic Arts. They've got a huge compound in Burnaby, British Columbia, just outside of Vancouver. And he found out I was a stuntman during the course of the conversation, and he invited me to come in and try out for Marvel Nemesis, I believe was the name of the video game. And I got the job. So from then on, I just started becoming their in-house big guy. Whenever they needed a big dude for a video game, they'd bring me in. I did The Godfather, Def Jam Wrestling, a couple of Need for Speeds, a couple of Fight Nights, Incredible Hulk, a long list. I think I've done about 40 or 50 games, a couple in outside studios too. And then they brought me in, they started giving me coordinator jobs after a while. Did Medal of Honor, I did all of EA Sports MMA. Coordinated that front to back, recruited the talent, trained the talent to be motion capture performers. And I've done a couple of days coordinating on the new EA Sports UFC game, too.
That's awesome, man. Has the motion capturing changed over the last decade or so, and how they do it? Is it more efficient these days?
Oh, my God, yeah, man. It's like the difference between a penny farthing bicycle and a Harley Davidson. Back in the day, they had to. It was so much more grueling and so much more extensive. You had to shoot so much more footage. There were fewer cameras, fewer angles that they were shooting from. And also, it was an education process. The guys who were running the shoots are number crunchers. And that still happens today, where they spend all their days in front of a keyboard. And, hats off to them. I practically get a nosebleed checking my email, so I can't conceive of what they do. But they kind of lose sight sometimes of the fact that the performers are still human beings. And they will run you into the ground if you let them. They'll forget that you're fatiguing. And you can do 8 hours of just take after take after take of highly strenuous stuff. So back in the day, it was really serious, and they were always very accommodating when I finally said I got to pull the plug for a little while. But those are some of the big differences between back then and now. Now the technology is freaking ridiculous.
EA MMA, that was a pretty underrated MMA game. Unfortunately, it did not have the UFC presence.
Yeah, it's a shame. I mean, that's back when Strikeforce was a separate entity before UFC bought it, and it was technically the Strikeforce game. I don't know why they didn't call it Strikeforce, but. I mean, we were very impressed with it. Nick Lang was the guy who came up from Florida to run the shoot, and I was coordinating for him. And he's a martial artist himself, and he put his body and soul into that game. We brought in some stellar performers. I even had Bibiano Fernandez and Pele come out and try out for the game. Well, Bibiano got lost. He was supposed to come out and try, but he got lost in traffic. And Pele came out and scared the hell out of everybody by kicking the head off of the Bob dummy that they had everybody hitting. So, we ended up with some great footage on that. I think it was a very highly underrated game for sure.
Very, very underrated. It's still on my shelf right now, actually, for Xbox. Are you at all surprised that years ago Dana White trashed EA and all of a sudden now he's buddy-buddy with them?
No, because Dana White is very much the same as Vince McMahon. And if there's a dollar sign on something, then a guy like Dana White, he's about business first and foremost, just like Vince is. And you will see these guys bite their tongue and nut up, and they'll bite the bullet to bring somebody back on board or bring a company back on board if it represents a profit, if it represents the greater good. And so in that case, it's you've seen it with Vince. I mean, Vince actually got back into business with Bret Hart and the Ultimate Warrior, two guys that you would have thought he'd never talk to again. So in Dana's case, I wasn't surprised at all. Whoever's bringing the best deal to the table, whether he likes you or whether he doesn't, I got a feeling Dana White would do business with you as long as it served the UFC. And
how ironic with the Ultimate Warrior, what bridged the gap between him and Vince McMahon, the new video game WWE 2K14.
Indeed. Nice way to tie it back in.
Yeah, money talks, right? Now, have you worked with the new UFC video game?
No, I believe my buddy Adam Pierce, Scrap Iron Adam Pierce, I think he may have done some work on that, and I think Cabana might have done some work on that. In fact, yeah, Cole on Steve Austin's on the Steve Austin show on Podcast One. Colt mentioned having worked on that game. So I think those guys did, but I haven't worked on the WWE franchise.
Okay, but I meant to say UFC.
Oh, I'm sorry.
No, that's all good.
I coordinated on the UFC game, and I did some motion capture as a referee. And then at the last second, they said, you know what? Why don't you give us a Bruce Buffer impression, too? So I don't know if it was any good. That's usually the kind of thing you want time to research and practice for. But, who knows? You might be seeing my body movements and Bruce Buffer in the new game.
Did they have you reenact the alleged fight between him and Frank Mir that he wrote about in his book?
No, I don't think so. To be honest, I think any fight between Frank Mir and Bruce Buffer would be very quick and very ugly.
I'm sorry, I'm slipping. Frank Trigg. Apparently,
why would Bruce Buffer be saying he fought Frank Mir? I'm like, did I miss the story?
Yeah. Apparently, he fought Frank Trigg once and he got the upper hand. I don't know if that's true or not, but that's the story. That's the legend, the urban legend, I guess.
Bruce said he got the upper hand on Frank Trigg.
I believe so, yes. I recall him saying that, or at least insinuating that he did.
I'm going to have to mention that to Frank and see if he's heard that, because that might be news to him. I would be extremely surprised if that were the case.
And Eugene asks, what's the most bizarre video game you've ever had to work for?
There's been a couple. There was one called Ripper that was just they changed the name since then. I don't know what it's called or if the game even made it all the way, but it was one of the most violent, like just horrifically over the top, violent, gory games I've ever worked on. They were showing me like art and telling me what they wanted me to do and the actions I was duplicating, and it was unbelievable gore. And man, I forget the name of the game, but there was a science fiction game where they actually wanted me skipping along the battlefield as if I was tiptoeing through the tulips. And, I'm not built for skipping or grace. And at the time, it was my first game back after knee surgery, so I gained a bit of weight while I was recovering from knee surgery. So I was 265 pounds and not really a good 265 in a skin-tight body stocking, skipping along the floor. To this day, I think it was a monumental rib.
That's hilarious. Has there been any game you've been involved in that isn't violent, or does pretty much every game you're involved with have some sort of violence or combat sport element?
I did a couple of Need for Speeds, but generally, I'm not an acrobat. I'm a brawler and a wrestler. So generally, when they bring me in, they want me to do something violent. I've done a couple of football games where all I did was run, but for the most part, I'm throwing stuff around. I'm beating up on opponents, either actual other performers or invisible opponents. I'm firing guns. I'm doing all kinds of cool stuff. If I'm being brought in on the game, then somebody's getting messed up.
Actually, I did find the article about Bruce Buffer talking about how he fought Frank Trigg.
Really?
Yeah.
Could you please send that to me? Because I'm gonna forward that to Frank, and he's probably heard it already, and maybe had a good chuckle over it. But I'm gonna see if he's heard about it.
Yeah, let's see here. With all due respect to Frank, because he's an awesome fighter, one of the top welterweights MMA. Basically, Frank and I were friends. He went into the elevator. As soon as we're walking in, Frank asked Dana to put him back in the octagon, but I'm a watch freak, and Dana had his great wristband on his watch, and I stepped in front of Frank to look at the watch, and suddenly I get a ridge hand in my throat. That's fine. That's a fine how do you do from Frank. We just had a drink together. Did I not drink right? I looked at Frank, and I said, you hit me. Why the F you hit me? And he said the wrong thing to me. He said, what are you going to do about it? And I just reacted since my old streak kicked in. I punched him twice in the stomach, basically with the same power, with the old rules of sparring, 60% equals 60%, but it picked up. We had a lot of fun on 10 floors.
I don't know what to say to that. I really don't. Where do you start? You start with Frank Trigg throwing a ridge hand, and it just it goes where it's going. You know what? I wasn't in that elevator. I don't know. I'm not going to sit here and call Bruce Buffer a liar. I've never met Bruce Buffer. He could be an extremely nice guy. He's a very smart guy. But, yeah, I would definitely need a lot of verification before I would 100% believe that story. And I would be very interested to hear Frank Trigg's take on that.
Now, I haven't played the UFC games in a while. I don't think there's an Ultimate Fighter mode. Do you think you should add that? Maybe with the men and the women, since you're such a big fan of that show?
I don't know. See, because the show has become, it went through such a horrible slump that while during the early stages of the game's development, that show was in the toilet anyway. That was back in the days when I was calling for it to be taken off the air. So I don't know that it's a popular enough concept to justify going to the work of putting it together. If you were going to do it, I would want them to duplicate maybe you have a tough one because those are all, everybody on that season more or less has become very popular by virtue of being a pioneer in that respect. And also, I'd like to see them do not entirely accurate season 18. Scrub the guys out and bring in more women. People like Tara LaRosa, who didn't make it in there. People like maybe Kelly Cobalt. Man, she would have been great in the house. But some of the women that haven't been recognized and the women who have been recognized on the show. An all-female season of Tough, I would love to see the game.
Excellent. Now, we had a similar question already, but I guess this is similar from BitTrack. What's the worst video game you've ever been involved with? I guess you mentioned Ripper, but is there one that was universally panned that even you hesitate to put on your IMDb profile?
Well, it's tough for me to say because I'm not a gamer. I don't want to sound like I'm biting the hand that feeds me. I'm always worried that if I get a gaming system, I'm going to be addicted, and I'm going to be one of those guys that I was thinking, okay, just 5 more minutes, and then all of a sudden it's 7 o'clock in the morning and I've been playing all night. So I've got to, if I'm going to stay focused on other stuff that I got going on, I can't have a gaming system in my house. So unfortunately, I don't really know a lot about how many of the games I've worked on played out.
All right, and this last one from Jamie before we get to what you're doing right now. What's one piece of advice you give somebody that wants to do what you did in video games? I'm assuming it's probably getting into stunt work first?
Yeah. Well, it depends. I mean, if you're an actor, then a lot of the time they want motion capture acting. There are skills you can pick up. Go to a movement coach, especially one that knows how to do animal movements, because that's something that they want duplicated a lot. If you get, say Gollum or Tarzan or something like that in a video game, they need somebody who can scrabble around like a human crab or lope along like an ape or something like that. So, and there's all kinds of, obviously, there's all kinds of mythical creatures and animals and monsters in video games, and they need people to duplicate those. So being able to be a very physical actor. And now with the innovations in facial mocap, then you want to be an actor too. You want to go to great acting classes, martial arts, being a stunt performer or training like a stunt performer. That could be your way into doing stunts in movies and TV is by starting with video games. And even voice acting. I mean, I did voice acting on the Dead Rising 2 video game. Actually, they even gave the character my name. And I auditioned for that as a voice actor. And all I did was sit in a studio and scream myself hoarse over several sessions. So being able to put all that together, be an actor, be a physical actor, movement coach, and then martial arts and or gymnastics. And when you put all those together, then you start canvassing around, contact Rockstar Games, contact Electronic Arts, find out who's shooting stuff relatively close to where you live, and start sending them your information and your demo reels showing what you can do. And, you keep at it long enough, you should be able to crack in.
Wise words from a wise man. Paul, you want to tell everybody that might not be familiar with Famous Bouncers what you're doing?
Yeah, Famous Bouncers is at Famous Bouncers is the Twitter account for When We Were Bouncers, which is the book that I've pretty much completed, which is famous and accomplished individuals telling stories about their days working behind the velvet rope at nightclubs, at rock concerts, and so on and so forth. So I got guys like Henzo Gracie, like Big John McCarthy, like Theo Rossi, who plays Juice on Sons of Anarchy, all telling their stories of their days as bouncers. And it's pretty much done. I don't want to say it until I've got these guys, but I've got 2 very recognizable personalities who have committed to provide some content. And that's why I delayed the release a little bit. It's going to be coming out on ebook well before Christmas. But when I've got these 2 guys, then it's coming out. And if you want to check out some sample stories, I just put something up from Jonathan the Road Warrior Goulet this week. Last week was Judo Jean LaBelle. Just go to facebook.com/Famous Bouncers.
Excellent. And hey, Paul, just letting you know, man, if you ever need any extra stories, maybe for a special edition of the book, you could call me, all right?
Yeah, no problem, man. I heard you're quite a notorious legend out there in New York, man. Every doorman in the place tells Fred Ricciani stories.
They don't call me the F-bomb for nothing, man. But until next time, everybody, we appreciate you joining us. Welcome to TSC Games. Stay tuned this Tuesday for the exclusive launch party and in-depth review of WWE 2K14. You can follow Paul on Twitter at MaulerMMA and at Famous Bouncers. Until next time, everybody, enjoy the matches.